It is a blessed day that we're in, and lots of good things going on these days. The National Institutes of Health state that somewhat over 25% of all prescription medication is given for some kind of peace of mind. There will be, according to those who keep records of these things, 300 million visits to national parks in the United States this year. 300 million visits to the park systems, and that doesn't take into account the state and local places. And the word is almost uniform on the part of those who visit our parks. Why do they go? We look for a place of peace and quiet. Nostalgia has had a resurgence here in recent years. Nostalgia for a former day, reflected in music and in fashion and in collectibles and various things that remind us of a time that was quieter, where values were more established and more prominent, where there was a sense of well-being in the world. The New York Times, in a New York Times article not so long ago, it was reported that of 3,400 years of recorded civilized history, there are 248 years of peace. 248 years out of 3,400 years of peace. It's a troubled world, isn't it? And we could be discouraged. We really could, because the Lord knows there's plenty of difficulty going on in the world. We just want today together in this place of worship, in our time of acknowledging the presence of God, we just want to acknowledge together that even though that's a reality in the world, that's not the whole story. And that's one of the things we want to really reflect on today. It is a troubled time, and yet there is a response that we look for. Even in the news, I just noticed briefly this morning that on the border of Israel, Syria is in the process of collapsing, and those who are taking over are not our friends. Another troubled place in the world today. So there are about 12 shooting wars going on right now. And so I'm just trying to watch you and see whether or not you're discouraged yet. Are you depressed yet? Well, let's don't be, because there is a good word that comes to us in many places, but out of John 14. And I want to invite your attention there to just a single verse that we want to emphasize this morning. Talking about the peace of God. Is there a legitimate response? That is to say, a response that is honest to goodness, a fact that we can point to in the world that we live in. A tried and proven way to find in this troubled world a path of peace that we can walk and be honest and legitimate in it. And the answer is yes, there is. And we want to really go back and connect into that. And so whatever the distractions have been, and there are many, aren't there? Whatever the distractions have been in your life this week, I hope for these few moments you can set that aside and you can kind of bring in your thoughts. And let's focus around John 14. And we'll read verse 27 and then put it in context. Verse 27 says, Jesus was speaking. He said, "Peace I leave with you. My peace I give to you. Not as the world gives do I give to you. Let not your heart be troubled, neither let it be afraid." Well, we're going to take that apart a word at a time here in just a moment, but let's remember the context in which he said these things. Actually, there are about three whole chapters that he gives to develop this idea that in a very troubled and in the presence of a specific, very, very threatening announcement, which he has just made, he's going to take a good bit of time now to outline. Folks, what I just told you is true. Guys, I just told you that I am leaving. In just a very few days, I am in this world no more, and you will not see me until the rapture. And they were startled by that. And so, as they were wrestling, trying to figure that out, Jesus goes into a rather significant or extensive explanation of what they are to lean on, to build their life on, in the absence of the presence of one who meant everything to them in terms of what their life was all about for the last 3 years. So we hear that familiar verse that we so often hear at a funeral service. It's very appropriate. John 14, verse 1, let not your heart be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many mansions. If it weren't so, I would have told you. I go to prepare a place for you, and if I go and prepare a place for you, I'll come back. I'll return again to receive you to myself, that where I am, there you may be also. And one said to him, Lord, we don't know where you're going, and we don't know the way. And Jesus said, verse 6, I am the way, and the truth, and the life. And no one comes to the Father but through me. Well now, let not your heart be troubled. That's easy to say, isn't it? But it is pretty hard to put into practice unless you have a good context to work in. And so what Jesus does now, beginning in verse 1 in chapter 14 and going all the way through chapter 16, he says, guys, I am leaving you, but I am telling you that I'm not leaving you alone. I'm not leaving you to figure this all out yourself as to how all of this is going to work. I'm going to send somebody to you. I'm going to send someone to you just like me. And he's going to live in you. He does live in you. And he is going to bring to your remembrance all that I taught you through those 3 years we've traveled together. And I'm going to have you remember when the tough times come and the circumstances get real difficult and they make no sense. I'm going to remind you the Holy Spirit who lives in you will. Be still, be steady, hold on, exercise the wisdom that I have given you and have available so that you'll be able to walk your way through whatever comes to you in these next days. And so suddenly, a general intellectual awareness that the followers of Jesus had, these disciples, he had told them at least a half dozen times in previous days, in previous months and years. A half dozen times are recorded. There are other hints at it. When he said to them, fellas, I am not always going to be with you. I want you to hear what I'm doing. I hear what I'm saying. I want you to see what I'm doing. I want you to understand what this is all about. Because one of these days, for too long, I'm going to be gone. I'm going to leave it with you. And if you don't understand it, and if you don't take advantage of what I'm making available to you, you're going to have a tough time yourself. And theoretically, we just in the abstract say, this whole thing that Jesus came to do is just going to disappear. It'll just drivel out and it'll be gone. Therefore, you need to get this. And the guys kind of had the attitude all the time, okay, we get it. You've told us 6 times already. But they didn't. And it didn't register. So they had a sort of an intellectual assent to what he had said. I'm going away. But now, all of a sudden, I mean, it's inescapable. And in a matter of days, indeed, he was gone. Well, what he gets at here then, when he begins, we just sort of broke into the story in this 27th verse. You need to read all 3 of John's 14, 15, and 16, and really 17 too, because that's the great high priestly prayer that he prayed for them when he got through explaining what they were to do in the light of the fact that he was leaving. So let's go back to verse 27 now, and let's make this very personal. And let me try and do this pretty quickly, but let me take it a word at a time. A word at a time as to what he said, and what difference does it make that he said what he said in this one verse. What difference does it make that he says, my peace I give to you? And then we go on through the chapter. Let's take it up one at a time. He said, I want you to be at peace when reality comes home and when you need more than a vague, general, intellectual assent to the truth of the Bible. Yeah, the Bible's true. I know that. I've known that all my life. I know there's a God. I've always believed that there was a God. The general intellectual assent is suddenly confronted head on by an issue or by a crisis in life, at which time all this that we have intellectually said and believed about God is called up for review. And we really are faced with, do I believe this or not? How does that help what I have been taught and have generally understood? How does that help now when the rubber meets the road. Well, that's what Jesus is trying to get across. And so he says this, my provision is available to you, my peace. Let's just stop right there. My peace. What does the word peace mean? Well, we generally know what it means. The word peace, as it's used right here by Jesus, in this case means calmness. It means in harmony, tranquil. It means I want you to realize that the peace that I have for you is a peace that you can actually take into your life. And in the light of what you're dealing with right now, you can be tranquil. You can be restful and calm. Not because it's unimportant or it's trivial. It's not. But because I am with you. And what I have for you, I want to make understandable to you. And I want you to draw on it and utilize it, because that's what's going to walk you through this crisis that you're facing, or this nonsense that seems to be in front of you. That's what I'm going to offer you. Now, I want you to get that in more than an intellectual way. I want you to draw on it. So let me explain to you in more detail what that is really like. You need to have the wisdom, the presence of mind, not only to have the information, but to know what to do with it. So, folks, if in the course of life, all of us run sooner or later, more often than we want, into a crisis situation or something that is really disturbing, it's distressing, it's aggravating. And so, at that moment, what we're laboring to do here in our work together as a church family in real world, real time, is to say that that is the way life is. And when that time comes, I want you to have established a default position so that you automatically at that moment go to the question, God is here in this. God's has something going on that he has allowed this particular thing to come. And so I want to be wise enough to be still and listen and access that peace that he says he gives me, so that I can, with a degree of tranquility, with a degree of wisdom, with a degree of knowledge and understanding, the practical, factual way to deal with this comes into my understanding. And in that tranquil setting, that peace that God gives comes. It is not a come and go kind of thing. Jesus said, my peace is always, always 24/7 available for your use. It remains that you access it. And then he goes on to say, the next phrase, if you will, that we look at is, this is a reality, this calmness, this wisdom is described in James 3, verse 17. And let me take a minute to look at that. What is this wisdom that God gives? And what is the product of the wisdom that says, when trouble hits, God, where are you in this? I'm watching and I'm listening, because I want to respond to this in a way that's right, that's healthy, that's good. And that is not only good for me, but is a good influence on the part of other people who are going through a time of difficulty. James 3:17 describes wisdom this way. He said there are two kinds of wisdom. He first describes the worldly kind of wisdom. That's in verse 14. And then in the next verse, he says this. The wisdom that is from above is first pure. And then the next word is, the wisdom that's from above is first pure, and then peaceable. And then peaceable. And then he goes on, gentle, willing to yield, full of mercy and good fruits, without partiality and hypocrisy. And so when disaster strikes, what I want us at View Baptist Church and all of the families that we influence, what I want us to do is to remember that God chose us, you and me, believers in him before the foundation of the world, that we should be holy and blameless before him in love. God saw you, and he saw your situation you're in right now before the world ever existed. And he has a response to it that's available to you, and it will see you through it. Ephesians 2, verse 10, for we are his workmanship in Christ Jesus, created for good works, which he before ordained that we should walk in, before the foundation of the world. the path that includes this you're dealing with right now, God envisioned, in fact, in real sense of the word, we can say he engineered it so that you may access him, move through it in a way that deepens and broadens your faith and your influence for good in the circle that you move in. And then he goes on. He says, I leave this peace with you. That is, the peace that I have for you is, again, not something that comes and goes. It abides with you. You have it. That is to say, at least it's there, and you have the key to access it. So I want you to use it. That's why I made it available. So that when the time of difficulty comes, you may have it to work with you. It abides. It is ever available. It does not come and go. And I want you to rest in that. I called up Larry Frymar, and I say, Larry, I want to have lunch with you. Meet me at Whataburger at 12. Larry says, I'll be there. I just forget it. I show up at Whataburger at 12 o'clock, and Larry's there. And I didn't expect anything else. Why? Because he said he would. That's what God says. I have peace for you that lets you deal with life in a way that's healthy for you and good for everybody your life touches. You can just forget that in the sense that you don't have to worry about it anymore. Don't wonder about it. Because God's going to show up. And he's going to be there for all that he has for you whenever the time comes. Once again, I'm trying to say to us, folks, access it, utilize it, draw on it when that time comes instead of this. Yeah. All right. Jesus says, I leave this peace with you. Notice then again, Jesus says, this is the peace that I give to you. He's very personal there. He's looking at these guys who are standing him, looking at him like a calf, look at a new gate. And he's saying, I'm saying to you, I have what you need to deal with what is coming. And he says that to you and me as well. Now, folks, I haven't said a thing so far today that's been profound, has it? If I get to something profound, I'll tell you it's coming so you'll know it's going to be profound, okay? Everything that I have said here, you already know here. And what I'm trying to do is to get all of us to the place where we have as a way of life, living 18 inches lower, from here to here, so that it shows up. And you know the benefit of it. That's what the whole Christmas story is there that he, the Prince of Peace, has come to live in us. It is personalized. Jesus has just the kind of wisdom, just the solution that you need. And it's not a general provision. It is specifically tailored just for you in your time of need today, this week, and in the days to come. Now he goes on to say, he said, this is my peace. This is my peace that I'm making available to you. It's not the kind the world gives. This peace that I'm giving you originates with me. I'm the author of it. I thought it out. I knew exactly what it needed to be, and I thought it out in the light of you, because I know your name, and I know where you live, and I know what you deal with and what you're going to deal with. And so my peace, it comes from me, it is for you, and I will have it for you on the occasion of need. It is on purpose. It is for this circumstance at this moment in time. And then he goes on to say, this peace that I give you, my peace, is not of this world. If you want to know what this world's peace looks like, you can go back to James 3:14, which I mentioned earlier. Can you get some peace from the world? Yeah, you can. Temporary. The world's peace comes about in a pill, or a new position, or a new partner or person. It comes in a diversion, something to get your mind off of the troubles of this world. And for a little while, and I am not faulting medication whenever that is called for, but I am saying that the world's answer to the struggles and difficulties and the in-your-face experiences of life is to give you some kind of prescription or some kind of diversion, something that will somehow sort of blanket or quiet for the moment whatever it is that you're struggling with. That's not the peace that God gives. So that's all the world has. It's all it has to offer. It's all it has to give. And that's why we need to access and understand a little bit about what is that will, that wisdom, that peace that God has for us. And so, let not your heart be troubled. What does he mean, troubled? He means to be in turmoil, to be anxious, to worry. Do you worry? The answer is yes, for all of us. At one time or another, in one way or another, to one degree or another. But not as much as it used to be, is it? Because what we have begun to enter more fully and completely in which we will not give up on, is, yes, folks, the troubles come in the world. That's not news. What you going to do when that time comes? And we're increasingly trying to move from the intellectual to the actual practice of those responses that we have available to us, which lets it move us through that which is hit us unexpectedly and suddenly and disturbingly. So, we are afraid of what? Folks, here's what I run into a lot in trying to work with folks who are in crisis situations. I've talked to a lot of people who struggle with and wrestle with, what if? What if? It's a health issue. It's a financial issue. It's a relational issue. In the issues of life. Okay, I got hold of it now, but what if? And what Jesus is trying to say to us is, it doesn't matter what is coming, the depth or intensity of it. Come to me, all of you who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you. What do you mean, take your yoke upon me? What do you mean? A yoke is something you work with. I mean, that is something that calls for labor. Yes, it is. It is the labor of understanding and discerning what is the wisdom of God for this. It's work. It takes discipline. It takes a person who is serious about the business of God is. He is in me. He is in the world. He has ways of dealing with the world. He thought it up to start with. He knows how it works. He knows me and where I live. And he knows my makeup. He knows what it takes in order for me to deal with this in a way that's honoring to him and good for me. And he says, it's yours for the asking. If you lack wisdom, James said, ask of God, who gives liberally and doesn't complain or fuss at us or gripe. Are you back again asking me something? He doesn't have that attitude. It is, welcome, come to me, and I'll give you rest. And so, where we're trying to go with all this then is to think through. Let not your hearts be troubled. Well, he said that because their hearts were troubled. I speak to you today because some of you have troubled hearts. That doesn't make you a bad person. That makes you normal. It's like the rest of us. But what I do want to say today is there is a response, once again, that lets you deal with what's going on in a way that is good and healthy for you. And it will never come unless we take seriously that God says, I have what you need for the asking. And so be still. Just be still and be quiet. And just lay out your situation with God in just actual literal words and say, God, I don't know what to do with this. And I want you to protect me from distraction. I want you to protect me from the enemy's deception. And I'm just going to be real still with my mind in neutral, and I'm going to listen, and I'm going to trust that you, by the Holy Spirit who lives in me, will bring to the surface of my mind, my understanding, this is the path. Walk in it. And I'm going to trust, Lord, that you're going to keep the rest of us, the harmful stuff away from me, and I'm listening for a path forward. And folks, I will tell you, on the authority of this book and by personal experience, God will bring to you, when with all your heart you want to know what God's response to this is, God will make it clear to you. He'll speak to you in a way you can understand. That's the truth. And it remains for us to begin accessing that increasingly in this troubled world that we live in, and not just work with a general, theoretical, intellectual. Personal. This is a personal thing with God. And so, just think about it for just a minute. In Romans 8, verse 32, Paul said, "He who did not spare his own son, but delivered him up for us all, how shall he not with him give us all things?" All things. If he gave his best so that you and I might become children of God, so that we might be lifted out of darkness and into light, from turmoil and anxiety and worry, to rest in peace. If he did that for us in salvation, wouldn't he continue to give it in increasing measure to those who are in his family? Well, of course he would. And so the question I want to be personal about this morning is this: is your heart troubled? Is your heart troubled? Are you wrestling this morning? Is your heart troubled? And my voice is troubled, but is your heart troubled? Let me ask you this, just personal. Have you ever really given your life to Jesus? Really? Have you ever come to a time in your life in which you, living with uncertainty and just wondering what it's all about, and thinking about, my common sense tells me I'm not going to be here all the way. What's going to happen to me when I die? Have you ever really thought about that? And as you worked your way through it, you found somehow or another that you had the sense that God was inviting you to come to Him. And you found that you didn't have words to explain it, and it was a new experience, but you found yourself drawn toward just saying, God, I don't know how to say this or do this. I don't know how this works. But I tell you, I'm not okay. And I don't know how to put it, but I don't think I'm in your family, and I don't want to be out here alone in this darkness and anxiety. And so, God, I want to ask you to come and forgive me of my sin and where I've done wrong and not been who I needed to be. I want you to forgive me and receive me and take me into your family. That ever happened in your life? Because when you do that, when that is the real deal, and when you surrender your life to Christ, He saves you forever. Now, it doesn't mean that everything that we had before and all the stuff that was in our life before and all the things that we'd messed up probably don't still have some kind of influence in our life after we surrendered our life to Christ. But it means you got something to deal with, someone to work with now that knows how to deal with that and clean that all up and make it right and deliver you from it so that you're not hamstrung with that anymore. Have you ever surrendered your life to Christ? And if you haven't, Jesus says, my peace I offer to you. And if you will surrender your life to me and say simply, God, take me, do with me as you please, whatever that means for the rest of my life. Make me the person you want me to be. If you haven't said that from your heart, you can do that. As you have the sense within you right now, that's what you need to do and want to do, then yes, you can. Some of you say, most all of us would say today, yes, there was a time in which I gave my life to Christ. But I tell you what, I've messed it up a lot along the way. And some of it is still going on right now. And God says, I'm here to offer you peace right now this morning. And let's deal with this once and for all and get it behind us and get on with what it's all about. That's what this season is about. Including the world's wisdom, the world's peace, trying to find answers in that. And now you sit here this morning, and God is saying to you in words that you understand that are personal to you. I've been looking for this in all the wrong places. I need not to become saved again, because that can't happen. But what I need to do is to have a fresh response to God, in which I say, God, I've been dealing with a lot of the what ifs. I've been aggravated about a lot of things, and I've really never really paid much attention to what you have for me in this and what you have for me in the future. That can be dealt with right now, this morning, in this service. Our God is an all-wise and all-powerful God, able to deal with any and everything. But God, if I may say this in this way, He is God, and He is just, and He cuts no corners. But He's a good Father. And He responds to the first heart, tenderness and honesty and surrender. He responds as a good Father. And He'll do that to you, for you, even in this service this morning. And so this morning, whether you have never trusted Christ, surrendered your life to Him, or whether or not there's been a time when you did that, but you've really taken an awful lot of it back, God is saying, my peace I make available to you. And this morning may be a time when you draw the line. You draw a line in the sand, and you say from now on, instead of looking for the answers of life in what I can do, or the banker can do, or the counselor can do, I'm saying, God, I want you. I want your wisdom, and I want your guidance for the stuff of life. And today is my first day in that direction. In this invitation time, I'm inviting you to make a response to what God has said to you, where you said. And if that means some kind of public commitment, this is the time to do it. If it is something that just you and God privately deal with, this is the time to do it. So we'll bow together.